now you can see that we have this lovely tube here, and on the back I cast it off, and I showed you I cast it off and then I added in so that we could have the tube with a hole in it, and in the very end it's casted off. So I found this really cool tool. You can buy it by mail order or in person at Lacey's in Berkeley. It's called a Tunisian knitting needle. It's a crochet hook on one side and it's a pointed knitting needle on the other. And it is really, really cool for adding in a heel. To add in a heel, you want to make a slip knot and then insert your hook in the corner where the sock is. And it's a little easier to do it with the hook than it is to do it with a straight knitting needle, except I went through the wrong way. So I'm going to grab it, pull it through, and now I'm going to tighten it down so it doesn't slip easily. So I always put in, it's actually 64 stitches in the round, but I usually add at least 10% to that. So I'm going to probably put 72 stitches in the round by going between stitches in some places. So I use this and I pull it out like that, and I go through, and the next stitch, and the next stitch, and so on. You'll notice that my stitches in my hole and at the end of the sock are very loose. That is to prevent any binding. Once we put these in, it will not appear loose like that, and eventually after it's been washed once, all the stitches will nestle into each other. So you can see we're making stitches on onto this needle. And we've gone about halfway across there, so what I'm going to do is cast off onto my final knitting needle. So there we go. I'm just going to move the stitches to the wooden needle that I'll be using to knit, because I don't want to try and run every stitch through this metal needle. You can only go through halfway anyway, so it's better if we try and move it to the other needle. And then now we have that needle there, and then the next stitch, pull through. And so on. And now going across the other side, you can see I've got 2 needles in, and I'm going through these stitches, and I'm putting 18 stitches on each needle, yielding a total of 72 stitches despite the fact that we're 64 in the round. So I'm just sneaking stitches in here and there. And now we have 72 stitches in the round, and like most other places in socks, I'll tell you that you need a transition of just a plain stockinette all the way around, just to get your stitches nice and straight and in a row. And there we go. This will make it much easier. Well, this is a different pair of socks, obviously, but what I'm trying to show you is how to build a heel. On the edge, there are 4 little stockinette stitches, and then in between, as you can see, it's knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. I don't know why, but my children do not seem to wear holes in the knit purl style of heels and toes nearly as easily as they do in a plain stockinette heel or toe. Another thing I'm going to show you is that this heel is essentially a toe in the middle of the sock, and it makes a nice right angle to make your sock a beautiful cuff, heel, foot, and toe. I've taken out one of my needles there, and I'm using this lighter colored needle because the yarn we're using is dark. So it's knit 2, and then I have a purl, but we're going to start a decrease here. So I'm going to take that purl, turn it knitwise, close it up, and then just keep with the pattern of knit and purl and knit and purl and knit and purl around the round. When I get to the other side, I'll show you the decrease the other way. Now on this side, that's our purl stitch. I'm going to turn it around like that and then knit through both of them this way. So we're reducing 4 stitches in the round, 1 on each needle. And now on each needle we have only 17. If I wanted to do a perfect 45-degree angle, I would reduce 1 stitch on each needle in the round every row. But my son's feet are too big for that, and I need more like a 60-degree angle. So what I do is I reduce 1 stitch every other row. And that way I don't end up with a heel that is too shallow for Josh's gigantic, ginormous foot. So you can see the angle here. It's not a 45-degree angle, so it'll make a bigger sock for my ginormous child's feet. And you can see that despite the fact that it started off with very loose stitches, very quickly it tightens up when we're making the heel. As you can see, my husband, Elon, has a normal foot. My son, Josh, doesn't. His feet are insanely large, size 14. Elon wears a more normal size 9. For this reason, I have to make the heels on Josh's socks really big to go around that 90-degree angle. As you can see, we're further along the heel. I have maintained the angle of 60 degrees. I know it says 30 there, but it means 30 from this line. I've also put my heel, which is nearly narrow enough at the back, on 2 needles because it's a little easier to control 2 needles than 4 when there are such short numbers of stitches on the rows. And the work will continue until we're ready to close the heel. Remembering that we only decrease 4 stitches every other row. I do my stitches pretty tight because I like a tight, clean fit. Now we're down to the last few stitches. If we look on our rows, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. As soon as we get it down to 9, we'll close the heel. And I'll show you that. It is a little harder to work with just the 2 needles. You kind of have to jerry it around your hand, but essentially it makes a nice clean flat heel at the end if you do it. Now we're at the end of the heel, and I have to do a funny little move. without getting it into danger, I need to flip the needles inside the sock. I've got them tightly. I'm flipping them outside the sock now and flipping it inside out. Then I'm going to stick my fingers down the needle and make sure I grab all the stitches. And then I can very gently pull it out and turn it. Now I have everything inside out. At this point, I sew each stitch to the opposite stitch to close the knitting. I'm using a simple embroidery needle or needlepoint needle. So now that's one row, and then we go through the original row and go backwards just to be sure we've captured every stitch. After finishing the row, I pulled out the needles and I kind of bury my tail back inside the loops that are still there. Comes out. I leave the tail a little long just in case it's needed. And now we have a beautifully formed heel. And as you can see, we've added our heel in. It's not particularly tight. Turn your foot this way, Josh. There it is. Makes a nice 90-degree heel. And soon enough, we'll be able to put on his toe, and you can see how ginormous his foot is. But we'll get on a toe. The toe is made exactly the same way as the heel is made. It's just a closure.